Why do Americans vote the way they do? The last few elections have shown that the country appears to be divided into red states and blue states, and that there seems to be a big cultural divide between the two camps. But a new book says this perception may be way out of focus. It is called Red State, Blue State, Rich State, Poor State. And joining us now is the book's co-author, University of Chicago political scientist, Boris Shor. Welcome to Chicago Tonight.
Thank you very much.
Timely book, I must say.
Thank you.
First of all, you write that the upcoming presidential election goes well beyond the whole notion of red state versus blue state. How so?
Well, in the 2000 and 2004 elections, we looked at the maps and we saw states divided into red and blue. And what was striking is how wealthy the blue states were and how relatively poor the red states are. And when it turns out, actually, individuals aren't like that. Wealthier individuals are more likely to vote Republican. Poor people are more likely to vote Democratic. So the reason we wrote the book is to try to understand why that is.
So just to make it clear, it seems to make more sense to think of it not red state, blue state, but to think of as to think of the quote divide as rich state, poor state. Is that what you're saying?
That's exactly right. So in the richer states, so think of a state like Illinois, or think of the richer state like Connecticut. In the richer states, wealthy individuals are not much more likely to vote Republican than poor people. But in the poorer states, so think of a very poor state like Mississippi, rich people are far more likely to vote Republican than are poor people. And that's really the difference.
So there's a paradox, though, because you say that the richer states, as states, tend to be, quote, blue states, vote for Democrat. And yet the wealthiest people continue to vote Republican. That's
right. Well, what's happened, there's been a real change in the past couple of presidential elections, and that there's a certain set of wealthy individuals concentrated in those blue states, which are now voting differently, far more democratically than they used to. And this is something relatively new. But if you were to look at the entirety of the country, rich people are still reliably Republican.
But it is a paradox, as you point out, that Democrats win richer states while Republicans win poorer states.
Right. It didn't always used to be this way. And the same thing is true for counties as well. It didn't always used to be this way. It used to be that rich states and rich counties voted Republican. If you think back only to the 1976 election, you had California, Illinois, New Jersey, all voted Democratic.
Well, let's look. We have a map from 1976. Yeah. Let's take a look at the map as you're talking about what happened in that election, and go ahead.
Right. It's quite dramatic in how different it is from the 2004 map. You have California, Illinois, New Jersey, all red states, and now these are considered reliably blue states.
And you look at the South. You look at the South, completely Democratic.
Completely Democratic, exactly. And so, right, we had this long transition of the South emerging out of the solid Democratic South, and now is a reliably solid Republican South.
Here's a map after the 2004 election, and Lyndon Johnson famously said that he drove the South into the Republican Party by virtue of civil rights legislation. Your reaction to that?
Well, the interesting thing about the South is that the South has been pretty conservative for quite a long time, and just because of historical circumstances found itself in the Democratic camp. And over the past several elections, what we've seen is a sorting out process where conservatives have moved to the Republican Party, liberals have moved to the Democratic Party. You you no longer have these as many blue dog Democrats and Rockefeller Republicans.
So what accounts for the difference from state to state?
Right. So why is it the case that rich states are now blue and red states are Republican? So what we see is actually the answer lies in rich people. Okay. So what we have to do is concentrate on rich people, and rich people in rich states tend to be economically conservative. They like their taxes low, but they're also socially conservative, socially liberal. And so nowadays, they're conflicted. They no longer have a natural home in the Republican Party. On the other hand, in poorer states, red states, think of Mississippi, wealthy people aren't conflicted in their social and economic views. They do find that natural home in the Republican Party. So because parties have polarized, the conservatives find themselves in the Republican Party and liberals in the Democratic Party, and you don't have a natural home for those Rockefeller Republicans in those wealthy states.
You write about culture wars, and you make the point that in your view, it is middle and upper income voters who are driving the culture wars, not the very poor or the very rich.
Right. If you were to compare poor people across states, they're all slightly they're all moderately Democratic. But if you look at rich people are very, very different across states. So in the poor states, they are quite conservative, and they're very, very different. So in their social views, they're very conservative. They're actually more religiously observant than the poor people within their states. But if you look at rich people in wealthy states, so think of Illinois or Connecticut, rich people are far less likely to be religiously observant. And what we know, of course, is the more religiously observant you are, the more likely you are to vote Republican. So there is a big gap there.
So just to make sure I understand, what you're saying is that the real difference is with rich people and their different social views in terms of what drives this, quote, red state, blue state divide.
Exactly. So a rich person in Illinois is very different from, say, a rich person in Alabama. And precisely where they're different is on their social views.
You write that in 4 out of 5 people live in or near big cities, and yet why do these small town values get played up so much in campaigns?
Right. This is a thing about rhetoric. Everybody wants to identify with the small town. This is something that's kind of lore in American political history. But the fact of the matter is, where are the votes? The votes are in the urban areas and in the suburban areas, and that's where the big battles are. If you look at Illinois, that's exactly where the political battleground is.
So how do you think this campaign is likely to play out in terms of how the electoral map is apt to break down?
Right. So one of the things that we see is it's probably not going to look very different from the 2004 election. These elections change a little bit over time. Over the span of decades, there's a big differences, but over election to election, there are likely to be small differences. But what's going to be most prominent in the 2008 election is going to be the economy. You know, it's true that social issues are becoming far more important than they've ever been in the past. But even so, the economy and people's personal economic circumstances are by far the most important factor in how the votes turn out. So it's going to be the economy. And the way the economy is looking, it's not going to be good for the Republicans.
Interesting. Boris Shor, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me here.
Again, the name of the book is Red State, Blue State, Rich State, Poor State.